Let's talk about ceramic coating your own vehicle start to finish and how you can make your paint look almost new even if it's 10 years old like this Honda Civic. There is nothing wrong with wanting to do things yourself, but if you don't have experience, you also don't want to make any costly mistakes. So this video is going to answer all of your questions, walk you through the process, including the products, and just to show you that it can be done on your own, I had someone who's never coated a vehicle before help me with this. I'll be linking my discount code down below in the description for 3 different detailing suppliers that'll cover everything you will ever need for detailing, including the products and ceramic coating I'll be using in this video. First things first, you will need to start with a proper decontamination wash. Not a quick little soap and spray, a proper decontamination wash to ensure your coating will bond to the surface properly and you are removing all of the contaminants from the surface. In our lineup today, we will be using Labo Cosmetica's Primus, which is a pre-wash solution. This will help break down surface contaminants and really help strip away as much as possible before we contact wash or clay bar the vehicle. And since we'll be applying an underdog coating, as it is extremely DIY friendly, we'll be using a few of their other products as well, such as the prepping and aftercare soap to wash and iron and fallout remover. Just as any normal wash, we are digging into the wheels first. I'll do an initial spray with an iron remover to let it remove whatever it can to start. Typically you can let this dwell for 1 or 2 minutes and just make sure you don't let it dry on the surface, just like any other product. You'll see it turning purple, and that means the product is reacting with the iron particles, which is exactly what you want to see. Once I blast that off, we will get into the contact wash. I'm going to be using P&S Brake Buster, which is one of my favorite wheel cleaners, and you'll see me slap on a little bit more iron remover because I actually like to agitate it on the surface as well. It's just really going to make sure you get everything. For the wheels, you'll need a tire brush, a barrel brush, which I don't think I got a clip of here, and then something for the wheel faces. Sometimes the wheel faces are okay with a wheel brush like this, but if you want to be safe, go ahead and grab yourself a dedicated wash mitt instead, especially if you have like chrome rims or a fully gloss black rim. And then we'll go ahead, we'll blast that off, and we'll move on to the paint shortly. For the paint, I'm starting with a rinse. First of all, just to remove any loose debris, but also because I am washing outside on a very hot day, which is not exactly ideal. You always want to have a cool surface to work with, but I'm going to be making this work by cooling down the paint first and working just in smaller sections. As I showed you near the beginning, we're going to be starting with the pre-wash solution. We're going to be using a foam cannon to apply it, let it dwell for about a minute or 2, and then blast it off. Again, because I'm working in the sun, I'm only going to do about half the vehicle at a time because I'm very comfortable with this process, but you could even work a couple panels at a time just if you want to be a little extra safe. Because this has to dwell on the surface while it's sitting on the paint, I'm going to switch back to my pressure washer tip, and if I notice any drying starting anywhere on the vehicle, I'm going to give it a mist of water, not enough to blast it off, just enough to cool it down and prevent drying. When I do blast off, I'm going to go bottom to top first. This is just going to make sure that everything loosens up, and then I'm going to go top to bottom just to rinse everything off. Next, we're going to be getting to the contact wash phase. We're going to go ahead and foam cannon on our soap, give it a nice layer, and then we'll hit it with a wash mitt. Between each panel, you'll want to rinse it off in your wash bucket that has a grit guard. Keep in mind your wash mitt does have 2 sides, so you can flip it and do 2 panels before rinsing. There isn't too much to this step, aside from going top to bottom and a nice straight line, so I'm just going to go ahead and let this one play out. Keep in mind you don't want to do your whole vehicle at once again, even if it is inside in a cool area. It just won't give you enough time to work properly before the soap starts running off. I always do half a vehicle at a time maximum. Sometimes I'll even break it down into quarters. Now we have our last step. Some people do this in 2 separate steps, but doing it together, in my opinion, will get better results. Iron remover is traditionally sprayed on the paint and then rinsed off once it dwells for the recommended time, but agitating it in will activate it faster, and you are literally working it into the paint, making sure that it gets everything. Now, some products can deteriorate your clay bar faster. I haven't had that issue with iron remover doing that myself, so this is my favorite method to clay bar, but a lot of times I will also use a synthetic clay mitt, which you might have seen in some of my other videos, so that is another option for you as well. Clay bars are great, but once they start getting filled up with the contaminants, you can only fold them over so many times before you have to get rid of it, and if you do drop it on the ground and it picks up a bunch of debris, it's basically garbage. And trust me, you will drop them, so the clay mitt is very handy as it can be washed and it lasts for far more vehicles. During the rinse, you'll see that the vehicle has no water behavior. This is typical of a vehicle with nothing on it, no polish, no wax, no sealant, and no coating. Keep this in mind for when you see the end of this video and the water beating when it rained the next day. And yes, you can even clay your glass, especially if you're applying any kind of glass coating, but in general, decontaminating it once in a while is just not a bad idea. The paint correction work is the tricky part. I'm not going to show you how to correct your paint in this video because that is a very large topic and typically requires years of experience to even be decent at. And I'm only going to explain polishing briefly because the focus of this video is primarily the preparation and the actual coating. So if you want a full correction, I would hire that portion out unless you have tons of corrections under your belt already and you're comfortable with taking that risk on. But maybe you're not worried about removing 90% plus of the imperfections. After all, removing scratches and swirls isn't a requirement of a ceramic coating, but it is typically highly recommended to ensure the best end result. That being said, maybe you are more concerned about just having the benefits of a coating like the water beading, ease of maintenance, hardness and protection, UV protection, chemical resistance, etc. And if you are excited to do it yourself and just want to do a quick polish, which should be the bare minimum before coating, that should be absolutely fine. So let's say you have a random orbital dual action polisher and some filler free polish like Rupes Uno Pure or Labo Cosmetica's Fiero. You want something filler free or designed for use before coatings because using a regular polish or something that has additives can affect the bonding process of the coating. Ideally, you'll want to measure the thickness of your paint with a tool commonly known as a paint thickness gauge. But if I have to be 100% honest with you, I've been doing this professionally for over 10 years and I've never burned through a clear coat once, even on heavy corrections with wet sanding. You would either have to be very unlucky, have very bad or thin clear coat, or make a mistake that should be easily avoided like buffing directly on body lines or edges. So if you are tackling this portion like I'm just doing a simple one-step polish here, here's some quick tips, but you could also just watch a whole video on this. Don't get too close to body lines or edges. Use a DA random orbital machine, especially if you're new to this. Just avoid the rotary polishers altogether. Prime your pad with a bit of extra product on your first run like I showed or will show at some point here. Spread it on the panel with a lower speed like 2 or 3 on quarter or maybe even half of the panel, just depending on your preference. And then you can polish it on 3 or 4. You really don't have to go above that. 5 or 6 won't really be necessary for a polish. And this is dependent on the machine. When I'm talking about the speed, saying 2 or 3 or 3 or 4, that technically means 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 revolutions per minute. It's just broken down into simple numbers. You can take your time, don't apply too much pressure if any at all. You can watch me polish to see the speed I go at after spreading the product. And then after that, you should only need about 3 or 4 dots of product for each section. Also, make sure the pad and machine is flat on the panel you're working on. Keeping in mind the panels curve and move, so you'll have to adjust as you go. You'll see when my girlfriend does her first polish, she is angling the machine too much, and after I noticed it and corrected her, the close-up will show how the machine should look. For the coating, we are using Underdog Pro, which was sent out to me to test by Anthony at getcoated.ca. This is not sponsored, by the way. This is just my honest opinion on the product. This was my first time applying it, and I wanted to show how DIY friendly it really is, and I was very pleasantly surprised with it. Every coating applies differently. I've used well over 10 different coatings myself, and there's a small learning curve on each different one you use. This one here is so easy that a beginner could use it as long as you have some patience and an eye for detail, and that's why I picked it for this video. Before you get into your coating, you 100% need to do an IPA wipe. You'll want to take your isopropyl alcohol mixture, typically a 70 or 90% alcohol diluted 1-to-1 with distilled water. Spray it on your quality microfiber, give it a wipe down, and then buff it off. Frankly, you should be wearing gloves for this part, unlike the one clip of me, because you want to prevent any oils from your hands getting on the paint. But again, I'm just doing my girlfriend's car for free, so I was a little bit more lenient with my process on this one. And going over it twice doesn't hurt either. This just ensures that there's nothing left on the paint before coating. Now get yourself an applicator block with a plastic liner. That ensures the microfiber doesn't soak it all up. This will save you tons of product and it'll go quite a bit further. Or you could just use the classic block and suede cloth, whichever method is easier. Just like polishing, I like priming the block first. A healthy few lines should be enough to do a panel to start. This coating specifically, you shouldn't have any issues with doing a full panel at a time. There's a lot of coatings, you kind of break it down into quarters or even halves, but this one, again, so easy to apply and has such a long flash time, you should have no issues with it. The temperature and humidity can vary a bit, between 50 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit and 40 to 50% relative humidity will work just fine, but I personally coated in all sorts of conditions without too much of an issue, but you should definitely want a nice enclosed, dust-free, and clean space to work in. This coating has a very long flash time, which is fantastic for beginners. I've read upwards of 6 to 7 minutes, although frankly, no more than 5 minutes should be necessary. That should be more than efficient. And frankly, I didn't even let it flash for that long on this vehicle and it still performed fantastic. Your coating will do one of two things depending on the product. It will either turn from streaks to beads, or it'll go from clear to a rainbow effect once it's flashed and bonded. Again, because this was just my girlfriend's car, I only let this flash for a minute or two just for the sake of time, but I noticed it fully flashed or rainbowed by the time 60 seconds was up, which tells me that it was bonded. You could play around with the flash time your first panel by doing it in quarters and trying 4 different flash times to see what works best for you, how long it takes to flash, and how easy it is to wipe off on each step, because if it starts feeling grabby, that means it's sat on there for a little bit too long. When you're wiping off, you want 3 different microfibers and find a very clean surface to put them on that is not your vehicle, because you don't want to transfer excess product on your paint. Wipe the majority of the coating with the first one, finish it off with a second, and then the third one is your final inspection and making sure that you overlap and you didn't leave any adjoining panels with ceramic coating residue, because that could leave high spots or streaks. Once you're done the vehicle, don't be afraid to do one more really good look over with a light. If you notice any high spots or streaks that aren't wiping off with your rag, reapply the coating to reactivate it, let it flash, and then level it again. And if that does not work, you might need to repolish that area, alcohol wipe it, and then reapply the coating. Once this cures for about 15 to 24 hours, you're going to take it outside and again do another inspection, because sometimes the sun will show you imperfections that inside will not, even with a light. So you want to go over the whole thing again. If you find any high spots, at that point you'll probably have to do a quick polish on it, alcohol wipe, and reapply that coating. All in all, this can be a very fun experience for any car enthusiast or someone who just enjoys taking care of their vehicle and doing things themselves. This coating can last a few years if it's maintained properly, and I have other videos on maintaining ceramic coatings yourself. 30 milliliters should do a car no problem, but if you have an SUV or a truck, just go ahead and grab the 50 milliliter bottle. 30 milliliters should do a car no problem, but if you do have an SUV or truck, go ahead and grab the 50 milliliter bottle. And if the price difference doesn't bug you too much, just get the 50 milliliters anyways. That's what I always do, just to be safe, because if you do have a little extra, you can just go ahead and do your rim faces as well. Hopefully these tips helped if you're trying to do this yourself. If you have any questions or video recommendations, go ahead and comment them down below. And do not forget to subscribe and like this video for more detailing content.